Today's speaker, and she will be joined by two co-presenters, is Professor Kavita Bala, who is an accomplished computer scientist, entrepreneur, and academic leader. And as of January 1st, 2025, she was appointed Cornell's 17th University Provost. Her many accomplishments are listed in her bio sketch. Professor Bala has been at Cornell for over 25 years. And before becoming provost, she was the first dean of Cornell's Ann S. Bowers College of Computing and Information Science, as well as having served as chair of the computer science department. Her expertise is in the field of computer vision, computer graphics, and artificial intelligence. Her leadership of computer science, which has nearly 2,500 undergraduate majors, was transformative. Computer science at many schools is very much male-dominated, but Cornell's department, women are 44% of its majors, which is over double the national average, and moreover, 18% of its undergraduate CS majors are from underrepresented groups. Now, with her outstanding credentials and background, she is an ideal academic leader in these very uncertain times. We are on the threshold of what's been called an AI revolution in academia, as well as in society at large. Unquestionably, AI is changing the face of public education at all levels, and as well, research programs are retooling informed by AI. Of course, the university has many other problems as well, and those will be dealt with by the group and in the Q&A. So for these reasons and more, it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome Dr. Kavita Bala to our Cape Kendall series. But before that, I do want to say a few words about the co-chairs presenting today. Phoebe Singers is co-chair, and she is professor of information sciences at the Bowers School and a professor of science and technology studies in the College of Arts and Sciences. And Ariel Avgar is co-chair as well, and she's the David M. Cohan Professor of Labor Relations, Law, and History, and she's director of the Center for Applied Research on Work in the ILR School. So with that, it is a pleasure to welcome Provost Bala and her co-chairs to the stage.
Thank you. So that's Phoebe and Ariel. Do you want to come a little further out here? It's just such a pleasure and privilege to be here. We've been looking forward to coming here to this group to get the benefit of the collective wisdom of all of you. As was mentioned, I came to Cornell in 1999, and in most places at Cornell, when I say that, people say, well, she's been here for a long time. In this group, I know that makes me a newbie. So we come here with humility, knowing we have a lot to learn from this amazing group. All of you have dedicated a large amount of your professional careers, your life, to Cornell's future. And we've been waiting as a group, therefore, to come and just get the benefit of your wisdom. So this is not really a talk. Our focus really is to raise questions that we hope we can get the benefit of your wisdom in the 1 hour that we have here, and hope we can continue to leverage your expertise. All of you are so well-known and well-regarded, not only in these circles, but well beyond, and the kinds of challenges we are facing as a university and higher education is facing writ large are the kinds of challenges that we need everybody's collective intelligence and wisdom and experience to try to navigate. And one of the things we find when we start having conversations of how did we get here, understanding the history, things that we tried that didn't work, and things that we should continue to try because, well, maybe they didn't work then, but they could work now. Those are the kinds of things we would also like to hear from you. So with that, I also did want to say, as was announced, I am a computer scientist. I came here in '99, and I came here not in the computer science department. I actually started as a postdoctoral researcher in the lab of Professor Don Greenberg, who's sitting right there. And I was with Don for my first 3 years of training before I went to the computer science department and started as a faculty member. And I came to Cornell because I had the privilege of working with Don. So it was an incredible experience then, and Don has been a lifelong mentor for me. So it's good to have him here in the audience. So as was mentioned, I started in January 1st, 2025. So it's about 13 months now. And I often joke it was a fun 20 days, and then it got quite complicated last year. Coming into the role, I do research in computer vision, computer graphics, and intelligence. And I knew coming into the role that we needed to think about how higher education is going to change, given the very rapid change in society that is coming through tech changes, not only AI, but social networks, through all of those kinds. These technologies are incredibly exciting in certain ways. What they can do for us in terms of medical breakthroughs, in terms of scientific discovery, in terms of new kinds of industry, new kinds of transportation. All of that is incredibly exciting. There's a great opportunity there that I actually wanted Cornell to leverage and lead in developing. But the flip side of that same coin is they're also bringing societal challenges, specifically depolarization in society right now, which is an issue we're seeing play out in our political landscape. Loss of trust, other issues around student anxiety, mental health issues, all of this that have come through the same kinds of technologies that also have great promise. So coming to the role, I thought that those are the kinds of changes that we needed to think about. And that was one part of what is changing our lives. But the moment I started, there were two other factors that came in, and I'll just sort of talk about them. The AI piece is one, but it was obvious last year, you have all been following the news, that our relationship with the government has fundamentally transformed. And ours, by I mean higher education writ large, not only Cornell University. And if for those of you who have followed this, if you've been reading about how that relationship was deep in the past, a big part of it was post-World War II, where the federal government in America realized that investing, whether it was the GI Bill, the Vannevar Bush Endless Frontier investment, the federal government realized that investing in universities, in their talent, in their expertise, was critical for America's future. And that relationship has been strong for 80 plus years. And last year, it was completely transformed in front of our eyes in a way that has still not settled out. So it remains in a state of flux. For those of you who followed, we have an agreement with the government, but before that, we had the government stop research in many areas in Cornell, stop funding research in many areas of Cornell, had a significant negative impact on many disciplines at Cornell. And all of that played out over last year. Separately, on the national landscape, funding is still unclear with various funding agencies. So we are in the state of flux that we needed to think about. So technology was one major disruptor. The relationship with the government was a second disruptor. And then the third one was really this decade-long slow burn of a loss of public trust that allowed the situation of last year to arise. So the government acted in the way it did with the backing, bipartisan backing in many cases, of the public that has felt that higher ed is not meeting the moment or meeting the promise of higher ed to serve community writ large. That to me was frankly the most shocking thing. It was a slow burn. It's actually been over a decade plus that this loss of public trust has built up steam, but it is what we realized we really need to take a hard look at to understand its reasons and understand what we need to do to actually change the narrative and fix any issues that need to be fixed around this perception of higher education. So given that, what I did when I started in this role is I stood up this committee called the Future of the American University. And Phoebe and Ariel here are two of the co-chairs. We have two others, Adam Smith and Praveen Setupati, who also serve as co-chairs. And actually, I'm going to go back in the slides just to show you. We have an 18-person faculty, 18 faculty committee, and Corey, who was right here, there, Corey and Jesse are helping us also run this committee. And we drew from faculty expertise across all the different colleges of Cornell. Some are a little more heavily represented than others, but we made sure that we got really a wide range of disciplines to weigh in on this question of how should we think about the future of the American university. As I said, it's a very consequential time, and the charge that I've given this committee, and Phoebe and Ariel will talk a little more about it, is to have a 50-year vision of how we think about our future. Now, that's pretty bold. Most of us can't predict next week. It's been a very unpredictable last year, particularly. So why 50 years? We know we can't predict the next 50 years. What we can do is think about how should we prepare our students for an unpredictable 50 years? We need to think about what are the core skills. That's what we do in higher education. What are the core skills we impart to future generations so that they are ready for the change that is going to come very rapidly at them over the next 50 years? And so our goal in this is also to have a community conversation. As I said, we have been very excited to come to this group, particularly to benefit from your wisdom, and to think about those three changes, and what does that mean then concretely for the core mission of the university, where the core mission of the university is education, undergraduate, graduate, and professional education. It's research and scholarship. Of course, we are an R1 university, and we are not going to change that part of our mission. And we've always been any person, any study. So at Cornell, we think about public impact and community engagement. So I gave this committee this very ambitious charge and told them, you need to come with blue sky, bold ideas that are really going to prepare our students for the next 50 years. They're doing an amazing job. And so with that, I'll turn over to them to take the conversation further. And then we're looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you, KB. So, as KB mentioned, the goal of this committee is to take this difficult moment for universities and use it as an opportunity to think strategically and in a principled way about how we're moving into the future. And so it's important to emphasize that our goal is not to simply, it's not simple, but not to react to what is happening right now. And also not to repeat other initiatives that are already at Cornell that are addressing some of the issues we're talking about, such as the AI initiative and radical collaborations, but instead to think about this on a longer historical trajectory. How did we get here over the past few decades? And where do we want to go over the coming decades? And you can find out more about our work if you're interested on our website, which you can find here.
Great. Hey, everyone. So the task of envisioning the next 50 years and the future of the American university, as both KB and Phoebe noted, is a big one. And so early on in our process, we decided to develop some principles that will help us guide decision-making, how we think about our recommendations. And I want to share the four principles that are guiding our work. First and foremost, it's clear to us that the strength of our recommendations will only be as strong as the input that we receive, which is, again, why we're excited to be here having this conversation with you. And we've been having lots of different discussions. We'll share some of those in a moment. In the process of having lots of discussions, wide discussions with critics and supporters across the ideological and political spectrums, it's natural that we will have disagreements, differences of opinion as to how the university should move forward, how universities in general should move forward, and how Cornell University should move forward. So we're anticipating, and this has actually been delivered, conflict and tensions as we move forward in our work. We don't just think that this is an inevitable part of our process. We think it's a productive and necessary part of our process. We think that it's through these tensions and disagreements that we will have meaningful, deep conversations about our collective future. It's already been noted, but it's important to state, we are living through a turbulent and uncertain time. There's a lot in the environment that we cannot control or shape. We're trying to do our best to focus on the things that we can control, the things that we do have agency over. Those are going to be the areas that we focus on. And finally, we are taking a long horizon, a long-term trajectory look here. And so we are doing our best. It's very hard to do, but we're doing our best not to get caught up in the challenges of today, but to view the challenges of today as indicative of fissures and challenges and problems that we need to be looking at and addressing as we think about this multiple decade period to position and put Cornell University as a leading higher education institution in the decades to come.
Great. So next we'll discuss how we're going about doing this work and describe some of the results and feedback that we've gotten to date. So the process that we've used, we started in September and spent about 2 months understanding the issues that we're facing better and laying out a set of questions that we wanted to discuss with the wider Cornell community. Since November, we have engaged in a very intensive listening process, and this event today is part of that listening process. We've held a variety of community events such as debates, talks, workshops, targeted stakeholder meetings with people in and outside the university who have particular expertise related to the issues that we're looking at or particular concerns. We've put together a series of advisory panels. We're a faculty-only committee, and we recognize that that has some significant limitations in our perspectives. So we've put together panels of people with wider expertise around the university to help advise us in our work. And we've been producing a series of short-form outputs, notably our Cornell Daily Sun column, which we recommend that you read if you're interested in what we're finding out and what we're thinking about. In mid-spring, we'll be producing an early set of recommendations, and then we'll have another series of feedback sessions and opportunities to get feedback from the community about where we are. And we will be producing a final report over the summer. This committee that we're on is tasked with thinking big, thinking blue sky, not getting caught up in the constraints that usually constrain how we think about the possibilities of where Cornell can go. It will be followed by another committee, which will be tasked with developing a strategic plan that is more concrete focused and laying out the kind of immediate steps that the university should be taking. And that will be one with a broader range of representation. So now we'll talk a little bit about how we are seeing the missions that KB tasked us with examining and how they're affected by these issues. And after that, we will open up for conversation with you to get your feedback. So the first mission is undergraduate education. And we've received a very large amount of feedback around this topic from many different stakeholders. For people outside the university, they often consider it to be basically the only mission of the university. And there are a wide variety of issues brought up. Here we've collected them into 4 key issues. Probably the most big one is around questions around accessibility and the ways in which trust in the university has been eroded by the opaque nature of admissions and parents and families trying to figure out what it takes to get into a place like Cornell, the high costs of university education, and the difficulty of knowing what you're actually going to pay until you're very late in the process of trying to decide where to send your child. A second set of issues is around this question of what are the core skills that students are going to need to have as they move into this turbulent period. Some of the skills that they'll need to have will be skills that we have always taught at the university, like reading, writing, critical thinking, but that may need to be taught in new ways because of the changing capacities, orientations, and skills of our students who have grown up with a screen-based childhood. Other skills will be new, such as skills working with AI. And one thing that we have heard consistently from employers is that soft skills, such as being able to work with others, being able to handle disagreement, even things like showing up to work on time and knowing what to wear, these are skills that universities traditionally haven't taught, but our students aren't getting them anymore wherever they did previously, and they need to be prepared for these things for the workplace. There's questions and concerns and opportunities around pedagogy, and especially this question of how do we best teach students who are used to seeking out information on their own on the internet. They have a very different orientation to reading, to watching videos, and to information gathering, and how can we best reach them with new skills and opportunities. There's also concerns around things like grade inflation, about whether we're calibrating grades correctly and whether those grades students are learning. And there's concerns and questions around the accountability, especially the accountability that faculty have for what they teach, how often they teach, and the ways in which they teach, and trying to find new ways to be able to ensure that people live up to their responsibilities around those things. Finally, there is a lot of concerns around issues around both ideological and demographic diversity on university campuses. There's a disagreement about the degree to which ideological bias or skew is a problem at Cornell, but there's a great deal of agreement that the ability for students and some faculty to engage across differences is missing and is a crucial skill for the coming decades and something that we need to lean into. And there's a desire to develop a kind of principled orientation to think about what it means to live in a community where people have significant differences, and to do that in a productive way that would be unique to Cornell and that would rise above this culture wars framing that pits ideological diversity against DEI as two opposing ideas. Our second mission is graduate and professional education, and here the first thing to note is that there are three very distinct forms of training that fall under this umbrella. PhD training, master's training, and professional degree programs are quite different in their orientations and their ways of teaching and in the issues that arise. But nevertheless, despite these differences, there are some things that are worth thinking about across these different programs. The first is the question of how and whether these degrees lead to specific careers that students can pick up. This is not so much an issue with master's and professional degree programs, which are usually fairly career focused. But for PhD programs, there's opportunities to think about how to structure these programs, especially in a time when there are dwindling academic positions to apply for, where they can better prepare students for a broader range of careers. There's also an interest in thinking about each of these programs, not simply as a program that gives you a degree, but an opportunity to develop different skills and competencies that could be shared between programs. For example, the ability to write to a public audience. That might be something that you would like to have in different master's programs, different PhD programs. And you'd like to be able to give students the opportunity to certify that they have those skills. But it also provides an opportunity to think about these degree programs less as silos, which each teach their own set of skills, and to share their resources and be able to train students across different programs. There's questions around the role of technology and how these programs are delivered, whether it's developing online master's degrees or other graduate degree programs, and what would be the use of AI in these different programs to support good learning. And finally, we'd like to think here about how to better bind students to the university. Graduate students often feel they're very strong identification with their field or their department, but less so to Cornell as a whole. And we'd like to see ways that students can better benefit from the range of things that are on campus and feel like they're part of the whole campus community.
Great, thanks. As KB noted, we're an R1 university, a research-focused university, so another one of our core missions, of course, is research. One of the exciting things about this committee and the process that we've undertaken is to look into things that we've in some ways taken for granted for a very long time. Some of our critics are noting that maybe research doesn't have to happen as part of a university. Maybe it can happen somewhere else through corporations or labs, other kinds of entities. And the subcommittee focused on research is looking at all the ways in which research needs to happen in universities, the connections, the linkages, the cross-disciplinary work that happens that can only happen in a university. So we're looking at ways to both flesh that out and articulate that in better ways. We've talked about the loss of public trust. KB talked about the loss of public trust. One of the reasons we think that happens is there's often a kind of one-directional flow between us, the university, and the public around research. We think it's critical to figure out bidirectional communications, providing our expertise out into the community and to the public, but also receiving both the problems and expertise and issues that need to be addressed in universities. The government relations moment that we're in has kind of articulated and clarified for us the vulnerabilities that we have around research funding. If we're to remain thriving as an R1 research university, we have to develop what our co-chair Praveen calls resilience or security around our funding and the ways in which we fund research. And then it's really important to note that we're talking about each of these core missions as if they're separate buckets. But the reality is, and you know this well, they connect across one another. So there are ways in which each one of these core missions connects, but the research core mission connects across a number of different other missions. One example is undergraduate education. And again, back to the first point, our ability to make the claim that research has to happen in universities is strengthened by the ability to say we train our undergraduate and graduate students through the vibrant research that takes place at the university. Corey and I were leading a discussion yesterday at the Carl Becker House. We had a lot of terrific questions from students. We had one terrific question about a student asking about the link between his undergraduate education and the research mission that we're engaged in and ways in which that is informing or enhancing his education. We need to make sure that that is strong. If we were gathering as part of any other Ivy League institution, we would have probably concluded the discussion with that last core mission, the research core mission. But we're, of course, not at any other Ivy League institution. We're at the only land-grant Ivy institution, which means that public impact, community engagement are deeply ingrained in our DNA, go back to our very founding. So a fourth subcommittee that we've put in place looks at our public impact, community engagement footprint. We've been doing a number of things as part of this work. First is defining public impact. As you might imagine, across the university, there are very different ways in which we think about public impact. Public impact as training, as technical assistance, as making accessible scientific concepts. And so we're looking at both the definitions of public impact across Cornell and also the different models of delivering on that public impact. It's really important to say, and this holds for each one of the missions, we have tremendous strengths around public impact at Cornell, an embarrassment of riches, if you will. We're in every county in the state through Cornell Cooperative Extension. We see there are millions of patient visits a year through Weill Cornell Medicine, clinical diagnostic powers through the Cornell Veterinary College of Veterinary Medicine. Lots of strength. And there's lots of opportunity for us to improve and do even more. And bringing this back to the loss of public trust, this is one way in which we think we are kind of in an advantageous position to address the loss of public trust because we have for decades, for a very long time, been out in communities. And so we're looking at the barriers. What's preventing us from doing even more in the public impact community engagement front? We're looking at strategic barriers. What kind of priorities are we setting for this? Structural barriers, what are the incentives and processes that we put in place to engage in public impact work? We call this approaches, but this is kind of nearing recommendations. And I say that because it would be great to get your feedback on these. We've been talking a lot about ways to better integrate and coordinate across our different public impact areas. So that's a big focus of our subcommittee. We've been thinking about incentives, how to better incentivize public impact. Would love to hear from you about that. I just talked about research and the role that it plays in enhancing public trust, but thinking about the connection between the research that we do and then the way in which it diffuses out into the real world. And finally, and I think most importantly, we've been talking about ways to develop a university-wide public impact strategy. Our colleges and units have very strong public impact strategies and ways of thinking about that work. We think it's critical for us to think about one that is kind of an umbrella strategy for the university overall. And I think we'll say one last thing and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Yeah, so again, if you'd like to follow what we're doing, you can read the publications and reports on our website, follow our Daily Sun column, but most importantly, we would love to get your advice and input now.
Now it's your turn.
Yes, I'll just bring it all together. There are a lot of big open issues that we are grappling with now, and the committee is moving. We are still in this phase of getting all of the feedback of the great ideas. Many people have thought about the oldest university is getting to be about 1,000 years old. Cornell's about in the 160 plus age, but there have been a lot of great ideas and some new ideas that we need to come up with because it's a different time, and we're seeking feedback. We're going to pull it together into a report, or it's looking more like a book at this point because of there's just the magnitude of challenges that we are facing. And we're going to then go out to the community and share those thoughts too, to get continuous iterative feedback, after which at the end of summer, we hope to have a full finalized report. Probably be a work in progress. So we'll turn to you.
Is this on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but I don't know if it's recording or not. It is recording.
Okay. Well, this is very exciting, and I'm delighted that you could join us today as a CAPE presentation. I think the retirees probably have lots to contribute here by virtue of their experience. For me, I'm sure we all understand that an undergraduate, even a graduate education, is much more than the simple sum of the parts of courses and credit hours taken for a degree. So my question is, how are you weaving the student experience into your work? There's so much to do. There's a lot that's been done to improve the student experience over the last several decades, but there's lots more to do, not least the challenges our students face developmentally with regard to their mental health. Many of our students are very, very talented, and many of those talents are accompanied by student mental health challenges. And as you know, the developing brain is one that requires a good deal of attention and care. So I'm wondering, how are you going to weave that set of concerns into your important work?
Yes, thank you. That is a fantastic question. So I'll answer because I'm leading the undergraduate education committee. We've been thinking about the issues you're talking about a lot, and anyone who talks to our undergraduates will inevitably be led to think about those issues a lot. So one thing that we're thinking about is that student and campus life and the academics have been somewhat siloed from each other. And that one thing that we think is really valuable is to bridge those a little bit more and bring in some of the insights from student and campus life into the classroom, particularly around these developmental areas where students need to grow over their time at Cornell, and someone in a 1,000 level class is going to be in a developmentally different place than a 3,000 level class. But we also need to think really holistically about what students are learning in different areas, what they're learning in the dorms, the way that the dorms are set up, the way that they eat in their dining halls, and what they're learning in their classes, the way that classes are set up. So we do need to really think across these domains And yeah, so basically I concur, and we want to build bridges better between these areas.
And I just want to add, Phoebe has been worrying about these problems for long before she served on the committee, so this is an area of also research expertise and thought for her. That siloing we have to fix, but there's also the flip side. For faculty, the professionalization that's happened on the student campus life is because the faculty want to, when it gets trickier on some of these not related to my discipline problems, they would like to somebody who's trained, which makes a lot of sense, but then it's kind of diverged a little bit. So those are the kinds of questions we need to look at. But mental health too is on the rise, partly this digital first students. You know, there's actually a court case going on right now with Mark Zuckerberg, right, is very much in the news for the past couple of days about how much those have contributed. So there are deep technological issues that have just blown up over the past 15 years. We don't have an understanding of them. So more research into that and bringing that into solutions and how we engage on campus in a more meaningful way is going to be part of one solution.
Maybe, okay.
Yes, this is, I'm retired, but I still teach. And so there's an age-old tension between worries about grade inflation, which you pointed out, as well as assessment of students. And AI has been part of the problem because what it has done in many classes is to take away the essay, which in fact it's a hard skill. But many of my colleagues have said you can't tell where the essay came from. So we're seeing an old solution. Blue books come back. The examination within the hour. This raises tensions with students because they think they're not being examined. Because now you're going back to objective criteria. And so, but it is a serious point because the assessment piece and grade inflation and pressure from the outside raises. So how are you folks thinking about this tension?
Maybe I'll just touch on the grade inflation piece, and I'll leave AI to our provost. But it builds on the first question we received. As I noted, Corey and I gave a little presentation to undergraduate students at the Carl Becker House last night. And we've been hearing a lot about grade inflation. That's been a big focus of ours. We heard it when we went to DC. We've heard it from internal and external stakeholders. And then we were having a conversation with students yesterday, and we were asking about which courses challenge them, which courses push them to think differently, to think outside of their kind of comfort zone. And there were at least 3 or 4 students who said, I don't take those classes because I want to get an A. I want to get a good grade. And a little piece of me broke inside when I heard that. It was very upsetting to hear. I said that, and that upset the student, but anyhow. So these things aren't simple, right? On the one hand, we need to curb grade inflation. We want to address that. But what's most important for us is that our students are pushing themselves and taking difficult classes. And so we don't want to fix one problem, grade inflation, by creating other problems where students are now even less inclined to take these more difficult, more challenging classes. So that's not a way to answer your question. It's to say we recognize it and we're trying to figure these things out in kind of collectively in combination. Yeah.
And I have a long answer on the AI piece that I'm going to just tell a little bit so that you know about what's going on in campus. So you may have heard, if you were following the news, I just created the post. It's an inaugural post of the Vice Provost for AI Strategy. Thorsten Joachims, who's a famous AI and machine learning researcher, has taken on that role. The portfolio is to develop an AI strategy around all of these questions, around the research piece, which is fundamentally going to change, but also the education piece, which is being led also by Steve Jackson, who's the Vice Provost for Academic Innovation. And also how we run the university, because we'll change everything that we do, all the work that we do through AI. So that's the umbrella under which I'll talk now about the specific question of Blue Books. So I'll talk about Steve Jackson's team and CTI, if you know them, Rob Vanderlyn, have been developing a bunch of strategies, and they have this great phrase of, we will support both leaning in and leaning out in AI. And the leaning in piece is they are providing support to faculty who want to bring AI into the classroom to improve how they're teaching while keeping a clear, and this is very important, clear view on the kinds of outcomes you want. You still want to maintain critical thinking. You don't want to use AI as a crutch or a cheat. You want to think about what the pedagogical goal of that class is, make sure you achieve that with AI as a tool. And the analogy I always use is calculators. When calculators first came, we stopped doing as much arithmetic drilling in our elementary schools and middle schools. And we redid, in fact, the entire math curriculum so that you do long division, multiplication in 4th grade, and then beyond that, you start talking about mathematical reasoning, you start talking about estimation, you start talking about mathematical principles rather than arithmetic. And arithmetic was sort of a proxy for really the mathematical reasoning that you want the students to develop. We have to redo all of every discipline has to think about now with this tool of AI. What do I really want them to learn? And what will they use the tool for? And we do believe it's AI on tap, not AI on top. So it'll be a tool we use to improve pedagogical outcomes. An example I'll give you, one of the faculty members actually 2 faculty members are using it in their classrooms, one for writing, in a writing seminar, but using the AI to critique the writing and to improve it. And to give feedback when the author has a particular viewpoint and is not open to an alternate explanation or a viewpoint, the AI prompts them saying, have you thought about this counter argument to this very passionate argument you've made? And we're actually seeing this really great engagement in those kinds of classes. So there is a lot of work to do there. That's the lean in part. The lean out part is we have a faculty member who's now, going back to the Blue Book, has figured out a way to run a 300-person class with oral evaluations to test the students. So students, I think, get 5 minutes or 7 minutes to walk in, they work with the faculty member, they're given 3 questions in that time, and it builds their interview skills, it builds their preparation skills. So we had actually funded it as a teaching innovation project, and it's now deployed. This is in mechanical engineering. The faculty member is Brian Kirby. And I'll tell you, as a provost, I saw that grant go through, I saw it develop. It turns out my son actually took that course and went through it and lived through it, and it really taught him different skills that he was learning in other classes. So it's this holistic thing. It is a work in progress. One of the things we say, for better or worse, we are all part of the living experiment that AI is imposing on us. Now, people have admittedly very complex emotions of being part of this AI experiment that society is actually giving us, but that is the reality of where we are. And we're doing it with our eyes open. When social networks came, there was this extremely naive sort of kumbaya worldview of social networks are just going to make every country democratic, it's all going to be amazing, and that's not how it played out. This time we're walking in, I would say, with our eyes more open to the pros and the cons, but it's still a very complex landscape.
So I came to Cornell in 1985. Yeah, I came to Cornell in 1985, mid-career, and I found a wonderful spirit of collegiality across the university that I tremendously valued. Over the course of the next 30 years, it seems to me that that spirit deteriorated. One of my colleagues at one point described the university as becoming more corporate. I'd like to encourage your task force to look at the polarization within the faculty and the way in which you can encourage renewing that spirit of collegiality that I found in the mid-'80s.
I know all 3 of us have opinions. I'll start with Phoebe.
Yeah, this is, thank you for bringing this up, and I really appreciate your perspective and seeing how that change has played out. I think one of the things that the committee thinks about a lot is what does it mean, as an umbrella, is what does it mean to be an institution that encourages pluralist values, where people recognize that there are differences but want to engage with each other across those. And we need to think about that within the university and how we engage with each other. At a time when things are very volatile and when there's a lot of pressure on the university, it's easy to come to the conclusion that we need to clamp down on people, and we need to make sure that people aren't speaking out of line and things like that. And what we're really trying to do is lean into the opposite and to ask, how can we work more effectively with each other? How can we recognize people's concerns and give them effective ways to try to make change for the concerns that they want to, rather than feeling like their only out is to go on social media and complain about how terrible the university is, but to actually make change more effective and accessible as a way of thinking about that. So thinking really about this question of, universities are supposed to be governed by the faculty, and how can we make that faculty governance be something that is real and robust and where we can work together even while we may have deep disagreements.
I just want to say two quick things on this. We're long-winded, so I'm going to try to be brief. One is, thanks for the comment. I think one of the biggest contributions we can make to society is to send our students out as adults who can engage in disagreements, debate, have dialogue. That's not going to happen if we're not modeling that. Right? That's not going to happen if we ourselves as faculty and staff are not doing that. And so I think beyond just the fact that it's a more pleasant environment to work in when we get along and collegial, as you noted, it's also part of our responsibility to our students. I think we need to do better on that front. And then the second thing I want to say is to sort of expand your comment outside of each of the units. I think we need to be doing better at collaborating and working across our units. That's another area where I think there's some place for us to improve and advance and model to students that we can do that as well.
And I'm going to add to that, and I remember when I first came here actually talking to you, you were in CAM, and all the kinds of great work that was happening then. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction from both of my colleagues and talk actually about the excess amount of busy work that has increased over time. One of the reasons collegiality is dropped is we don't hang out with each other as much because everybody's in their office or working from home, checking their email, where there's this barrage of information coming to them. And so decreasing the amount of busy work, and one part of that is the corporate nature of compliance and things that we ask faculty to do. This is something that Phoebe cares deeply about. It's something I've talked to her about. I would like to, in my provostial role, that is something I'm hoping I can actually try to address. Decrease the amount of grunt work you do so you spend time on the intellectual end. That's what we hired faculty for their intellect, not for the grunt work that ends up dominating our time. So that's another thing I think that will contribute to collegiality, because if you take that away, I think people will have more time to do some of the things. I was in a department where the faculty would go together out for lunch every lunch. Now everybody's so busy, they still try to do it a couple of times a week, but not everybody can do that. And I think if we address some of that, you can increase that. We do have the luxury of being trapped in this small town together, and that does increase collegiality in certain ways. So we should lean into that going forward.
Thank you. At the beginning of your presentations, you mentioned the challenges that the university faces. You listed 3 challenges: one technological, the second governmental, and the third public trust, or the decline in public trust. Those are mostly external challenges. I've been struck by your presentation here today that you've mostly talked about internal responses to those challenges. But the second challenge in particular is an external challenge. It comes from the government, particularly from Washington, and particularly from the executive. I would like to ask if, as part of the challenges you're hoping to respond to, the university has developed a strategy to respond to the challenge from the government.
So I can start with that. I will say one of the things, we didn't cover all the different, we said we're in this intense listening session. One part of that is we went to DC, we went to Albany, different challenges from different governments and different priorities, but also different challenges for us as a university. And we walked in saying, we're here to understand what are your concerns about what we're doing, and let us tell you what we are doing. And we had actually very productive conversations around common areas where they raise concerns. An example actually that struck us, now there are different, this government changes their topic of the day quite frequently, I'll say. So I'll tell you that when we visited there, what was top of mind for them is around undue foreign influence. That was one major topic. Another topic was around academic rigor. A third topic was around AI. So we went to the Department of Education and we talked to some other also Congress, Congress people, congressmen, women, say Congress people. I'm not sure what you're supposed to. Congress members, thank you. So while we talked to them, these are areas that one of the things we did is actually try to explain why some of the problems that they're worried about are either overstated, and there is, by the way, a full distribution of universities they're dealing with. And many universities, we do expect smaller schools and universities are going to close because of some of the actions that are being taken. And some of them are probably appropriate because they're not necessarily serving the community. This whole question of whether the students are actually getting a rigorous education that helps them for their careers long term is a fair question that all of us should ask on anything that we do. And at Cornell, this is part of what this committee is doing. Now, we can prove in spades that actually a Cornell education helps you a lot in your life. So it's not something that we're actually vulnerable to on that particular attack. But understanding what are the kinds of long-term vision that we need to specify is something that we can engage with educating and also hearing where the concerns are and addressing. So it is part of a longer strategy. And I will say, and this is why I told this committee, you need to think about 50 years. The government is going to change, and my expectation is actually we're going to swing between very different views that the government is going to send our way. And part of our resilience is actually having a clear sense of what we want to do as a university, who we are, and what we contribute to our students' lives, because that will drive you past the daily swings of whichever government happens to be in charge and imposing a certain set of views on us. And it is the case that I think all parties have a particular view that they impose on us, and we have to be robust in our response.
I'll just build on KB's comment with two things and say, first is as we said in our presentation, we're trying not to develop a strategy just for how we deal with this government, but how do we deal with the kind of our reliance on federal funding long term. This moment has made us realize that what we thought was solid, a kind of solid relationship and solid funding model is not on a solid ground as we thought. So we're thinking about that. A lot of the work that we did early on around the government relations issues was trying to flesh out the social contract that we've been working under between government and universities, and thinking about the ways in which that social contract has changed or needs to change. So that's been one of the ways in which we've been thinking it externally. You mentioned external and internal. We're also having conversations about what's the right mix of support that we should rely on for our research. We're in the kind of advantageous position of also being the land-grant institution for New York State. So we've been talking about how much of our reliance should be federal, how much of it should be state, how much of it should be philanthropy. We spoke with a university president yesterday who's making progress in finding ways for philanthropy to fill in some of the gaps, or at least to rely more on philanthropy for even basic foundational research as opposed to just government. So that's a long-winded answer to your question to say we are taking this moment as a point at which to reassess our reliance on federal government, on federal funding for research.
Thank you. I was delighted with the initial presentation, looking forward and structuring an approach to consider the future. But frankly, what you've been talking about is in the next 5 years. So I'm interested that, one, looking 50, how about 20 years in advance, might be very useful. And second of all, what is missing is a futurologist. That to establish academic discipline that deals with how do you predict the future given certain events. And maybe that exists now and I'm not aware of it. I know a lot of people are interested in it, and I'd be interested in your comments.
Can I speak to this? Yeah, so my area of research is around the social impact of technology, and specifically I focus on futuring, the ways in which people have historically and now predict the future based on what they see as technological changes. So one of the clear results of my area is that predictions of the future are rarely correct. And so the form of futuring that I think is the most effective is not to predict what the future will be, but rather to consider what the range of possible futures could be and to lean in on your agency for driving in a direction of a future that you would maybe more like to have. I actually agree with you that what we discussed today is too present-focused, and part of the reason it's too present-focused is because we've been engaging in this really long listening phase. And when we talk to people, people are concerned about what's happening today. They're concerned about what's happening on the ground, and so we're kind of mapping those things. But what our orientation needs to be towards, and that's going to be the next phase of our work, is saying, what is the vision that we want to move towards? So like in the undergraduate education committee, we had this giant list of problems that people brought to us. I think I had a list of 27 different key problems for undergraduate education. But we shifted focus pretty quickly to think about what should education look like? So developing an idea of a kind of human-centered university, what are the capacities that we want students to have? That is an eternal vision. That is not tied to the current moment. And that's the kind of the move that we need to make now in order to be able to not predict the future, but be able to navigate towards the future.
And if I can add, while thinking about that, one of the things we benefit from, our committee has people who know our history and will often say, we think we're inventing something new, but it was actually 200 years ago they were talking about something similar, different language, but a similar thing. And so being humble about that, recognition of that through line which exists in higher education, because higher ed has been around for a long time, is part of, while keeping, this future does seem different, but also similar in certain ways to our past history.
We have time for.
I apologize, we did not pick anybody from this side. We need to make sure we do. Do you have, Corey, can you get a mic? Thanks.
Thank you. One issue that may help navigate through the future and tie many of these threads together is to consider the concept of information literacy. I hope you are conferring extensively with the university librarian. Part of the concern is that that aspect of the university is incredibly important. The resources that students and faculty have access to do their research. Also, their understanding of what those resources are, how to find them, and how to assess them. That's a critical issue that librarians have been teaching from day one. And we call it information literacy, and that's something that has applied for a long time, but will apply for even more critical reasons as we move into the future. And I have to say, I was kind of shocked at a talk that a Cornell person gave about AI here within the last year. And my question to him was, what is going into AI? What is Cornell involved in feeding into AI? There are many, many academic, high-quality, peer-reviewed sources that students absolutely need access to. They need to understand the value of them. A lot of them are behind paywalls. And unless somebody's breaking the law, they're not being dumped into these AI systems. So that's just one example of how the libraries play a critical role. We teach hundreds of classes every year to students on how to do research and how to assess information. And I think that's a core, critical part of the university, and I would like to see that mapped in your constellation of issues that you're dealing with.
That's a great point, and I'll just respond to several. There are many, many pieces to that. One is around just firstly the core value of understanding how to discern, fact from fiction, misinformation, disinformation, even more important, always important, but even more important now than before because of the amount of AI slop that's out there that is deeply compelling looking, but actually completely false, right? So one piece of all of our AI education is this issue of how do you learn to verify, to understand what the information is, and we're rolling out an AI literacy program for incoming students that Steve Jackson in the education hat is doing with the university library. So it'll be available for all of our incoming students. So we're developing it right now, and we are piloting it out so that our new incoming freshmen have that. That's one piece. Another piece is this question of what goes into training this AI. These companies are doing it. We have no idea what they're doing, and they are motivated by profit. Going back all the way to what is the point of a university, we play a critical role in actually defining how these technologies should be incorporating information. And we're out in the dark right now. We don't have the nuclear powers, the nuclear power and the compute that they have to run those big kind of training algorithms to develop these large language models in AI. But we just had a conversation with one of our Ivy Plus presidents saying, that's where we should all come together. And we'd had a conversation 2 years ago. Last 2 years have been difficult for higher ed, so we got a little distracted. Go back to that conversation 2 years ago of thinking, we curate the information, train an education large language model that actually has verified sources of information in it. That would be a contribution to humanity. So those are the kinds of things we need to do. Some of them are in collaboration and some of them are our in-house thinking. But a lot of great work to do here. We have great people who are thinking about it. And it's ongoing. We had you here. So.
One Zoom question. One last question on Zoom. I expect most other R1 academic institutions have been engaged in similar self-reflections and planning efforts. Have you reached out and communicated with any of them to seek and share insights and ideas? I think it is critical that we address these issues collaboratively and not competitively.
Should I? We know of a couple. Yale and Stanford are doing efforts around particularly public trust.
University of California is also, we have been in contact with some of them. What I would say is that most of them are focused only on one issue, which is usually the public trust issue, and they're focused very short term. They're about what are we going to do in the next year. And so we've been working also with AEI, has a Future of the American University project, and they are more long-term focused. So they're the ones that are most closely aligned with us and that we've been speaking with the most.
I totally agree with the sentiment of the question. We should be collaborating across universities that are engaged in this, and we've had those conversations.
What I will say is we did bring these 3 issues together. That is, what we're finding is that is quite unique. And that might result in, I think, a different timeline that we are looking at, particularly because AI is very integral to our enterprise and the implications on misinformation, disinformation, what that does to public trust. We have actually holistically taken that into our remit. So I think that we might arrive at a different place, but we're working with anybody who wants to engage with us. Arizona State is another one that's doing some futuring. So we're working across the board with those. In AI, we are, again, a little ahead in actually having a single person who is thinking about AI strategy. Most universities have it diffused around, so we're trying to coalesce around them also thinking about how to build AI strategy. We could do collaboratively if we are able to put it together. We are into overtime here. Thank you.
While we're getting ready to wrap up, can I make a big request of all of you? KB has charged us with coming up with bold and big recommendations. If you have any, please send them our way. We'll have author attribution, but please send them our way. We'd love to hear your bold and big, ambitious ideas. Thank you so much.
And it's at fau@cornell.edu, right?
Yes.
That's the future of the American University. fau@cornell.edu. Send us email or talk to us, but send us email at any time, and we're happy to incorporate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We want to thank all of our speakers for a really stimulating session, and as a token of We have, come on up, guys.
Very kind. We didn't expect guests. We just thought the conversation was
Okay, and before you go, so the next, then on March 19th, Linda Rear, recently retired from entomology, will be speaking on the subject of sharing a passion for nature and science. On April 16th, Ryan Lombardi will be, his title is not clear yet, but he's going to talk about current challenges with students. And Ron Hoy, that's me, I'm going to be giving a talk called Singing in the Brain. Okay, so thank you very much.